Welcome to the Living in Alignment podcast. My name is Amy Landry. Through a collage of conversations, here we distill mindful living and timeless wisdom within a modern, everyday context. Thank you for being here. Divya Alter is a certified nutritional consultant and educator in the Shaka Vansiya Ayurveda tradition. Born and raised in Bulgaria, she is the co-founder of Bhagavat Life, the only Ayurvedic culinary school in New York. Having taught thousands of people how to cook, she and her husband, Prentiss, launched North America's first Ayurvedic chef certification program and Divya's Kitchen, an Ayurvedic restaurant in Manhattan. Divya is the author of What to Eat for How You Feel, the new Ayurvedic Kitchen. The book is now in its 7th print, with a German edition recently released also. So Divya, thank you so very much for making the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to meet you, Amy, and to be on your show. Thank you for having me.
I know this is a very generic way to start a conversation, but I would really love for you to share with us your background and how you really came to this work right now. I know a little bit about your path and I find it really fascinating. So feel free to be as elaborate as you like in sharing that.
Okay. I was born and raised in Bulgaria. That's my accent. And when I was 18 years old, my teenage rebellion, actually, I told my parents I don't want to go to prom. It's too much vanity. What's the use of prom? So I actually never revealed this. You're the first person I'm telling this. But yeah, I refused to go to prom. And my teenage rebellion was that I was looking for the meaning of life. And I decided to be a yogi because it was something very different in Bulgaria in those days. And also, during the communist time in Bulgaria, everything spiritual was forbidden. So we were not allowed to go to church. There were no yoga studios. The only way I connected with yoga was through books, and all the spiritual aspects were taken out of the books. But there were asanas, like postures, guidance on how to make different yogic postures. And and this was like hardcore hatha yoga books. So I tried getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and taking cold showers and trying to do asana by looking in the picture and reading the description. And I lasted 2 days. You really need to have a teacher for everything you want to learn, especially yoga. So, but I didn't give up. I felt that there is a lot of meaning in the philosophy. And you know, when we come on crossroads in our lives, our antennas are up and we look for signs in where to take the next step. I was feeling that way, and one day I was walking down the street in my hometown, Plovdiv, and I met a person who was running an underground yoga ashram in my town.
Sounds very rebellious.
It was so unexpected, and I went to check it out. It was very unusual, never seen something like that. But the atmosphere, it was just a tiny apartment, really. That was the so-called ashram. But the atmosphere, the purity, the cleanliness, the smell of incense, and then the class, and then the food at the end of the class, they served a full feast of Indian vegetarian food, which I have never experienced before. And I was trying to be a vegetarian, and it was so hard because people thought that I was a part of a cult or something. It was so unusual to be a vegetarian. The culture didn't support it. My parents were worried that I would become deficient and unhealthy. There were no books or cooking classes in how to be a healthy vegetarian. So when I tasted that food, I was like, this is my place. This is what I've been looking for. So it was a Bhakti yoga ashram, and I offered to help in like become an intern and help in different ways, and in turn learn about everything about yoga. And my first job was wash pots and chop vegetables in the kitchen. So that's how I fell in love with food and cooking in a very unusual way. You know, it's not like in culinary schools you just do it as a job. And at the ashram, I was trained to do it as a selfless service and as a meditation. You know, scrubbing the black on the pots was cleaning my mind, and like not speaking unnecessarily, focusing the mind, being positive while cooking. Like all these things were an invaluable part of the beginning of my journey and also my training.
Very much your dharma.
Yes, I realized my dharma, especially in terms of teaching, and also providing healing in many different ways through food, through music, or whatever it is that I do. So, yeah, I talk a lot of. I love your alignment theme. So this was just the beginning of me for me.
So I assume that your experience of this underground Bhakti ashram was the main influence for you to then take the leap to go to India. Would that be correct?
Yes, I went there to study at a school in Vrindavan, and I really wanted to connect with the roots, with the tradition, to experience spirituality for myself. And it was staying in India for almost 5 years and studying, and it was really life-changing for me. It really helped build my character, so to say. But and I've learned a lot while I was there as well.
How many years were you in India?
5 years. Like sometimes I would go in and out, like because the summers are invariably hot.
Yes.
It's just so hot. But sometimes I would leave for the summer and come back. But yeah.
So you essentially went to India to deepen your understanding and experience of the Bhakti path, and then yet this threw you on the path of Ayurveda, because this is where you met your teacher, your guru, correct?
Actually, well, this is when I first experienced Ayurveda. My main teacher, Vaidya Mishra, I met later on when I came to the United States. But when I was in India, you know, it's the traditional medicine of India, and I was living in a small holy town. Of course, they had modern hospital and all that, but every time I've always been drawn to natural medicine and using food, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how it works. So when I was in Vrindavan, every time I would get sick, I would go to the local doctor, who happened to be an Ayurvedic doctor and a really good one. And he still practices. He's still there. I hope to go back and visit him. I haven't been there for 15 years now. But his name is Liladhar Gupta, and he would always put me straight. Like he would tell me about what's going on and give me some herbs. But he would always say, these foods are good for you right now. They will help you heal faster. And these foods you really have to avoid because you can't digest them. And I would say, but why not chickpeas? I like it so much. It has so much protein. He would say, no, you can't digest it. So this is how I first experienced using food as medicine. And using food, like connecting with food, selecting foods, not just for taste and what I like, but also the foods that I can digest, which is a very how to say, unknown concept in the Western world. We usually choose the foods that we like to eat.
Of course, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting hearing your story and your experience, particularly within India, because it's such a beautiful expression of how all of these paths and these systems, if you will, that we almost see as very separate in the West, are very integrated. So the yoga and the Ayurveda, and you know, as an Odissi dancer myself, the practice and culture of Odissi dance is profoundly informed by Bhakti principles. You know, the Gita Govind and the Ashtapadis have played a huge role in Odissi choreography. You've probably seen a lot of Odissi dances in Vrindavan.
I love Odissi dancing. It's divine. It's so captivating.
It is, and it's almost like a path of yoga, this path to moksha or liberation. And, you know, and then the asanas are very much have these common threads with the, I guess, the postures and the geometries linked to the yantra element of tantra. And, you know, we could go down a wormhole in this conversation, but I think the point is to come back to the fact that these are all very much interwoven in daily life in India, and they all are part of really the same system.
Yeah, exactly, because they all come from the Vedas, the ancient Sanskrit texts. There's so many Vedic books on not just philosophy and spirituality and different spiritual paths and the gods and all that, but also a lot of very practical books. So they're called like Upavedas, like all the texts on Ayurveda are considered like subsidiary Vedas. Or there are texts on martial arts and architecture and dance and music, and there's a society building and all that. So they all stem from the same tradition. And what I really love about that is they're interwoven, as you said, but also the principles that are presented there are universal. And even though they stem from ancient India, you can apply those principles anywhere in the world. And that's what's so valuable about the Vedic tradition.
And that's what makes it so timeless in its wisdom, certainly.
Yeah.
Speaking of books, is there a book that has greatly shaped or influenced your path that you can think of? There's probably many.
Yeah, definitely many. Well, one of the first books was the Bhagavad Gita, of course, one of the main books in the Bhakti tradition, but also one of the main books in yoga. So the understanding that I'm not this body, I'm an eternal soul. It's such a liberating, even if you think of it theoretically, it almost frees you from the fear of death. But also, it helps me see my existence, it helps me see where I'm at now from the perspective of my eternal existence. And it gives my life a bigger perspective, and it's less depressing. it helps me develop patience because we're eternal.
Yeah, it's a significant book, I think, and it's interesting. I don't know. It depends on how you were exposed to the Bhagavad Gita, but this came up on a recent other podcast conversation, and I reread the Gita recently, a couple of months ago, and I read it with fresh eyes and a totally different experience, and picked up on all the subtleties and almost like the secrets of the Gita. It just seemed like a bit of a dry story. And then I actually was immersed in a training with a teacher of mine, and it was like something was unveiled, reading it all over again. It's a pretty exquisite book.
Yeah, that's the potency of timeless literature. And also it's so interesting because the Bhagavad Gita speaks about food. So when I started studying Ayurveda, I was like, oh yeah, Ayurvedic food is the sattvic food, the food that balances you, the food on the path to enlightenment. I just started making those connections as well.
Absolutely. So speaking of food, let's talk a little bit about Ayurvedic cooking. First of all, what do you think are the common myths or misconceptions about Ayurvedic food?
Well, would you give me some of those? Like, what do you think are common myths?
Well, I think probably the most common one for me is that people think Ayurvedic food is Indian food.
Yeah.
Do you get that?
I get that a lot. We actually did, when we first opened Divya's Kitchen, we were also listed on platforms like Yelp. I don't know if you have Yelp in Australia, but we listed like vegetarian, vegan, and Indian. And so many Indian people would come and they would become really disappointed because they were expecting the very spicy, greasy Indian food. And they would say, this is not Indian. And then we just took Indian down because that was a what do you call it?
It's misleading in a way.
They had the wrong expectation because Yelp doesn't have Ayurvedic category yet. But yeah, again, going back to the universal principles of Ayurveda, and one of those principles is to eat locally. Because eat locally, not just in terms of the local ingredients, but also the local environment, the geographic altitude, and and the lifestyle and all that. So every region has particular diet because it helps support your body to balance in that particular region. So yeah, you can apply Ayurveda anywhere in the world, Ayurvedic cooking and eating anywhere in the world. You just have to understand the basic principles like digestion, food compatibility, seasonality, and all these things, and then apply them to your local time, place, and circumstance. And it doesn't mean also there are so many foods that were not available to the sages who wrote the Ayurvedic texts and described so many ingredients, thousands of ingredients, that, like quinoa, for example, or artichokes. They were not listed in those texts, but does it mean we shouldn't eat them? No, they're actually very healthy and very nutritious. But you can apply the principles of studying those ingredients, their taste, their different other properties, and then determining how you can use them for balance.
And this is ultimately, I think, what has made your book so accessible, your cookbook so accessible, because it's not Indian food. Many of the Ayurvedic books and cookbooks that I have, the food in there, the recipes ultimately, appear to be Indian food. There's so much dal in there and different rice-based dishes and whatnot. Obviously, very much similar to Indian food, but based on the principles of Ayurvedic cooking. But your cookbook is really accessible to a worldly, a global audience, because it's literally like food that people know and love already. Like lasagna, for example, is not an Indian food, but you can apply the Ayurvedic principles to that.
Yeah, that's my passion, I call it Ayurvedize, to apply those principles to different types of cuisines and show really delicious variety, because Ayurvedic cooking is really the healthiest way to eat because it's very personalized. You can customize it according to your own needs. That's what Ayurvedic food is. It's all fresh and the healthiest ingredients, but you take it a step further. You customize it according to your digestion, how you're feeling, what you need to balance. So honestly, I got tired of eating Indian food. I mean, I enjoy it, but it's just, I didn't grow up eating Indian food. I didn't know about turmeric until I went to the ashram. It's because we had such limited access to ingredients. But again, you can apply it anywhere. And honestly, that's my fantasy. I hope one day I can travel at least to a few parts in the world and stay there for a month or more and absorb the local culture and the local ingredients and create Ayurvedic recipes with those ingredients. But again, like, for example, when I go to Bulgaria to spend time with my family, I cannot find a lot of ingredients that I can easily find here in the United States. So people were asking me, oh, can you translate your book into Bulgarian? And I'm like, you won't be able to make a lot of the recipes simply because the ingredients are not easily available. So I was thinking, okay, what Ayurvedic recipes can I create for the Bulgarian population to make it accessible to them?
You almost need to open up Divya's Kitchen everywhere around the world and make it locally appropriate. Is that a lot of pressure for you?
Yeah, someone else can do the work.
Yeah. I honestly, sincerely, for years, I have had the idea of where I live here in Newcastle, Australia, wanting to open up an Ayurvedic kitchen, just thinking if no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it, even though it's not at all my area of expertise. But I just think it would be so special to have, particularly in all major cities, and maybe we'll get there at some stage. But speaking of the principles of Ayurvedic cooking, would you mind going a little bit deeper into this? Perhaps we can talk about food combinations or, that post-digestive effect, which I don't think is really a consideration or even something that people are aware of if they haven't been formally trained in Ayurveda.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the Ayurvedic approach to food is different. The way we perceive food from an Ayurvedic perspective is different than modern nutrition perspective. The main difference is that in modern nutrition, we focus on nutrition facts. you take an ingredient, study it in the lab, and then you give a list of, okay, so many carbs, so much protein, sodium, carbohydrates, this, that. We focus on nutrition facts. What I really love about Ayurveda, it just blew my mind the first time I started studying the Ayurvedic concepts of food, is that Ayurveda looks at food in terms of its attributes. So it helps us connect with food on a lot more personal level. For example, what is the taste of food? How does food taste? Is it sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, or astringent? These are the 6 tastes in food. But the taste is very significant because it has an effect, physical as well as mental, emotional effect. And different foods have different predominant tastes. So then, how does the food, how does it feel, the food? Like, is it heavy or light? Is it moist or dry? Is it smooth or rough? So there are 10 opposing qualities of food. And usually this is what helps me when I think about food in terms of its attributes. It helps me connect with food on a more personal level. And establish, in my book, I speak about having a relationship with food, getting to know each ingredient, getting to know what it feels like, tastes like when you cook it in different ways, when you eat it in different seasons. How does it feel like? So that's how we are with people. We talk about people in terms of the character, the attributes, the qualities. We don't describe people in terms of how many pounds of fat and muscle and bones they have. So we talk about the qualities. So when you connect to food with its qualities, then you connect to how you're feeling, then it's much easier to select foods that will be balancing. And we always balance with the opposite quality. So if you're feeling very cold, like you're in the winter, very cold, you told me it's a very cold day in Newcastle today, you need warm foods that will also warm you up on the inside. You need comforting, grounding foods. I am here in New York City. It was 90 degrees Fahrenheit today. It was so hot. And I need the opposite. Like, I've been craving coconut water all day because it's so cooling and so hydrating. So when it's very hot, you need cooling foods to balance. And that's the third category of food properties, is the metabolic effect. Is it cooling or heating on your liver and your body in general? So you could eat, for example, zucchini is a very cooling ingredient. It cools down your body. So you can have a hot zucchini soup that will cool you down. It's not the temperature, it's the metabolic effect. When you eat the food, as you're digesting it, does it cool you down or heat you up? So that's a unique concept of Ayurveda, which I find extremely important because modern nutrition doesn't know about that. So very often people are like, let's say you have a severe heat problem. You're coming up with rashes, you're feeling very hot, it's coming up to your head, you're feeling dizzy and nauseous. I've experienced this many times when I was in India. And then you may say, oh, yeah, just have some garlic because it's a universal medicine, it's good for everything. But garlic is such a heating food. I mean, your mouth is on fire when you eat it. So like increases like. You're very hot, you eat heating foods, it makes you even more hot. So in Ayurveda, we always talk about the properties, and then it's so much easier to select the foods that are healing for you, balancing for you right now. Then the post-digestive effect, that's another concept. So the 6 tastes of food: sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent, and astringent. After the initial stages of digestion, when that digested matter continues into the intestines, then it transforms into 3 tastes, which are sweet, pungent, and sour. So, I mean, it's important to know this if you're considering food combining on a deep level. but most people don't go there. So
Yeah, that's a pretty deep. You don't want people to become too obsessed or panicked about the impacts of their food, but it's still really handy to at least have an appreciation and an understanding. And certainly, I think probably for most listeners, the biggest takeaway is understanding that heating or cooling effect of their food, and that's got nothing to do with the temperature that they consume their food. And so when we speak here of heating and cooling, we're not literally talking about hot and cold temperatures, but their effect on you post-digestion. So
exactly, yeah.
yes, so that's a really nice consideration. So that's a great segue here. Let's talk about spices for a little bit, because spices are a really important component of Ayurvedic cooking. So would you mind speaking to why spices are so important, and perhaps share maybe what your favorites are or how you most commonly like to use them? That would be great.
Yeah. Well, Ayurveda uses a ton of spices, not only to produce exquisite flavors, but also to support digestion. So, in Ayurveda, everything kind of rotates. In terms of Ayurvedic food and cooking, everything rotates around supporting your digestion to be at its best. Because when we're not digesting food properly, that semi-digested matter turns into the first level of toxicity in the body. In Sanskrit, it's called ama. And that's a very sticky, sludgy thing. When we eat something, when we feel a lot of phlegm the next day, that's ama. That's something we didn't digest, and it's just causing clogging and blockages, and it's kind of, you feel sluggish after eating food that you didn't digest properly. So that ama, when it sits in the body long enough, the body has a natural intelligence and detox cycle to clear that semi-digested matter, but if it's not that system is not working for us properly, the semi-digested matter will just sit there in the channels in the body, and it begins to ferment and becomes very reactive. And then that's the breeding ground for disease. That's where free radicals come and bacteria grows. And so that's where we begin to feel sick. And spices in Ayurveda are used for flavor, yes, to add different tastes to the dish. Yes, very important. But also they support digestion. They're called yoga vahi in Sanskrit. They're like vehicles that help carry nutrients to where they're supposed to go in the body. And also they're very, they support elimination as well. So there are different spices to balance different body types, to certain spices that we need to use more in the summer or in the fall or in the winter. So it's very important to learn how to cook with spices, because to me, spices are my best friends in cooking. Because they make the food really tasty, but also I feel that they're really helping me to feel better.
There's definitely something to be said, I think, for not only the digestive benefits, but also, the great immune support as well that we can get from integrating spices on a regular basis.
Yeah, exactly. Immunity goes down when we're not digesting our food properly. So digestion and the strength of your immune system is directly connected. So some of the spices that I really love, my teacher Vaidya Mishra always used to say the 4 super spices. Like, if you're new to spices, if you want to start somewhere, start with the 4 super spices. And one is turmeric. There's so many studies about turmeric nowadays for its anti-inflammatory properties. But Ayurvedic texts describe turmeric as a very powerful cleanser for the liver. It's a heating spice, increases heat in the body, and the liver is a hot organ. That's why it's always important when you cook with turmeric to always add a cooling spice like coriander or fennel. And these are the two more of the 4.
And to be specific here, you're meaning fennel seeds and coriander seeds.
Yes, seeds. So it's important to buy. I always recommend buying whole spices and grinding them fresh to receive 100% of the benefit of the essential oils, and the flavor is so much better, and it's just more vital. It's more the vibration of the spices
The
is higher.
prana.
The prana, yes. So turmeric is fantastic. Coriander, very cooling spice, really good for it's actually good for every body type. Very diuretic, so it supports the detox cycle in the body by eliminating toxins through the urinary tract, and also it's very good for kind of driving heat out of the body. There were a few years ago, I somehow had like a heat stroke or something in the summer, and I started having all the symptoms, and I called my teacher, and he said, Vaidya Mishra, and he said, oh, just have zucchini for 3 days with coriander tea, and it would help drive the heat out of your body. And it worked. It was very helpful. And the fourth spice is cumin. Cumin helps with absorption of nutrients, really good for digestion. It helps it's a heating spice, not too heating, but kind of warming. So it helps opening the channels in the body, and clearing the path, like Vaidya Mishra would say, the spices clear the path for nutrients to go where they're supposed to go.
They almost decongest in a way.
Yeah, well, a lot of spices help with decongestion. Ginger is one of my favorites. I use fresh ginger. It's just so powerful in so many ways with circulation and antiviral and antibacterial properties. But it really helps increase strengthen digestion and really open the channels and clear stagnation. I love ginger.
Yeah, I do too. I absolutely love grated ginger every day. Actually, and going back to India too, and again, reiterating that Indian food is not Ayurvedic food, but going to India is certainly a great way to be exposed to spices. I remember my first trip going there a number of years ago, and finding, it's terrible, I know, but finding this cookie shop, and I'm sure it was, everything in there was loaded with all the nasties. But there was this cookie there that was like an ajwain cookie, and I was like, what is this ajwain stuff? And so I was like, I'm so curious. And I wanted to try these cookies because it said that it was an Australian cookie shop, which it obviously wasn't. But I thought, oh, this is really interesting. I'm going to try these Australian cookies. And, given that there's a cookie with ajwain, I've never heard of this before. And I tried it and it was delicious. Like the flavor of the ajwain was so beautiful and so complementary to the sweetness of the cookie, just like the savoriness of it. And so I tend to use, when appropriate seasonally, love ajwain as well. And I think that being exposed to Indian food can be a really nice way to be exposed to the different flavors of the different spices.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, ajwain is such a powerful spice. I used it a lot more in spring during COVID because it has powerful antiviral properties. And especially antibacterial as well. It was scientifically proved that it kills, I don't remember, 7 or 9 different strands of bacteria, including salmonella.
Wow.
So it's quite powerful, but it really helped, very clearing. It's a very heating spice, really hot, and it helps clear. It really helps digestion. It helps also clear congestion and things like that. But yeah, don't use it in the summer so much.
No.
And you can add ajwain to like cookies, also if you make chapati, like the flatbreads, or if you're making bread at home, or what else, muffins, you could add a little bit of ajwain because it really helps digestion of the heavy carbs.
I often actually add it to homemade masala chai. I don't put black tea in there. I don't have any stimulants, but I find that's a really nice, just a subtle amount of it in like a really warm milk-based chai. So good. So continuing the conversation around Ayurveda, and in fact, given that today is actually Guru Purnima, I would love to speak with you about your teacher. How was it learning with him over many years, and that relationship and that studentship? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, well, I tell you how I first met him. In my Bhakti practice, I have my own spiritual mentor, actually several spiritual mentors. And And I've been in the presence of powerful teachers, and they continue to guide me till today. I'm eternally indebted to them. When I first met Vaidya Mishra in person at the office of Dr. Marianne Teidelbaum, he's one of his students who practices Ayurveda in New Jersey. And it was a very small office. And I entered and I felt like, he filled the room, when his aura filled the room. And I felt as if I'm in the presence of spiritual teachers. And he passed away. He passed away, actually, unfortunately, on the day my book was released. Literally, like, we were at the Rizzoli bookstore for the launch party, and I came home and I heard the news. It was very sad, but it was his time. But when I first entered, I felt like that spiritual presence. He was more than a doctor. He was a very spiritual person as well. And yeah, and he had this mystical thing, like he would read your pulse, and then the first thing that comes out from his mouth was almost like prophetic. It was like, how do you know? Sometimes he just says the first sentence, you start crying. So his analysis was very exact, and he started treating me, and I started getting better. I was working also on, it wasn't just the Ayurvedic treatment to overcome my autoimmune disease. I addressed it with other healing modalities as well. I always speak about the healing theme. But one thing about Vaidya that really attracted me to him was that he was really expert at adapting the ancient principles into modern day life, considering what we expose to today, like electromagnetic frequency and radiation, from our cell phones and computers and all these electricals that we constantly use. They have an effect on our bodies and minds. Like, he would consider the pollution. When he told me when he first came to the United States, he was using all these traditional protocols that worked in India, and they weren't working on the American patients. And he called his father, who was still alive at that time, and he said, what am I doing wrong? And his father said, you can actually feel, if you're exposed to a lot of EMF, you can feel it in the pulse. And Vaidya noticed also that 98% of his patients in America have way too hot livers. So certain remedies like ashwagandha, is such a powerful and beautiful Ayurvedic remedy, is very heating. And he said ashwagandha is great and you need it, but it's too hot for you. It's not going to balance you. So he designed unique protocols to deliver the herbs by bypassing digestion through transdermal creams, through other transmucosal drops and things like that. So that was very innovative of him. He never strayed away from the tradition, but he adapted it to time, place, and circumstance, and kept the tradition alive. So, and also he was an incredible cook. And like no other teachers, I was already trained as a cook and had a lot of experience, but I took all possible cooking, everything he was teaching, I was learning. And the cooking classes and the cooking tips and just cooking with him, I've learned more than I've cooked with anybody else. He was very, very deep, very wise person.
Sounds like such a great blessing and a gift to have, spent the time with him.
Yeah. So I try to share what I've learned from him.
So important. And I think that probably he, would really see everything that you're doing is such a great way to honor the teachings and the lineage and the knowledge and as you say, adapting it to the context of the people and the community that are around you and, the world we're in right now. So, and that's I think the great the value of Ayurveda in general is that it's just timeless principles that can be applied to anyone, anywhere, at any time. You know, there's nothing else like it in that respect. So speaking of food, could you please tell me what is your absolute go-to meal? Like your favorite meal? Doesn't have to be Ayurvedic. Whatever you would love to eat.
Oh, well, if it's something that I eat a lot, it's khichdi. I love khichdi. So khichdi is Indian, but also very Ayurvedic stew with grains, lentils, and vegetables cooked together. Cooks very quickly. It's very nourishing and satisfying. Very easy to digest, and it always helps me reset my body. So because it's so easy to cook and it's just one pot to wash afterwards, I'm quite busy with all the projects that we run. So I end up cooking a lot of khichdi, and it's not the same. I like to make different variations, but that's probably very balancing food for me.
Are you making variations, obviously seasonally appropriate with respect to vegetables, but are you also therefore doing the same thing with the spices? You're changing the seasonal
Yeah.
application with spices as well?
Yeah, exactly. So in the winter, I always use more warming spices like ginger, black cardamom pods, which are really good for digesting protein and have this smoky flavor. And you can get them from an Indian store. I highly recommend black cardamom for savory
I
dishes.
haven't put that in khichdi before. It's always been in like chai and different things, but I'm going to give that a go.
Yeah, the black cardamom, the brown
Yes.
one, not the green one.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then you can put some ajwain. I really like black seed or kalonji seeds. Kalonji is the Hindi word, or black seed or black cumin.
I think it's nigella. It's also called nigella seed.
Nigella sativa, yeah. So that's another super spice, really good for digestion, very tasty. And then in the summer, I don't use as many spices because, see, most of the spices are heating. So in the summer, I would use more fennel and coriander. I would use more fresh herbs for flavoring in the summer, like dill and basil and parsley and cilantro especially. So, yeah. And I would, like in the spring, I would cook more barley in the khichdi or quinoa. In the winter, I'll have more rice. So I like to vary the grains as well.
What about beverages for you? Like, I'm curious, what do you drink normally?
Well, it's very easy because I have a restaurant right downstairs and we make a lot of amazing beverages. So I don't usually, I usually focus on the things that only I can do, and then I can just go grab something. I do like tea a lot. Like for me, tea is a very quick and easy way to balance myself. So I like to use digestive teas. I love ginger tea. Even in the summer, sometimes I would have ginger tea because I need it. Or I love cooling teas like rose tea. I have rose teas in my book. So tea is something that I really like to drink. And I also like to make limeades with fresh fruit, like strawberry or mango is in season now. We get really tasty mangoes now. So make mango limeade. I love pineapple juice. Just freshly squeezed pineapple juice is just so good for digestion and elimination and the skin, and it just feels so good when I eat.
Do you mind if I ask you, at your restaurant, how do you serve cooling drinks? Because, the classic thing is, cool drinks come cold with ice, and, I'm curious to know how that would look.
Yeah, our restaurant is so weird in this regard because we don't have an ice machine. And we do buy ice from the deli across the street. We just get a bag of ice and we offer it to people who request it, but we never serve ice with anything. And it's funny because a lot of people sit down and we offer them water, and I very often say no ice, and we're like, oh, you don't have to worry about that here. And sometimes when people request for ice, and if I know them, I see the regulars, and I can just go and talk to them and explain why we not recommend ice with your food because it really weakens your digestive fire. They're like, oh, okay, then I don't want it. Thank you. I learned something today.
Yeah, well, people are just so conditioned to do it, aren't they? They don't think about it, you know. But even if there's no ice, I find most restaurants, like, the water is always chilled. It's icy cold, even in the middle of winter here.
Yeah, we don't do that. We have a water filter and we just serve it that way. But the we like the drinks we just chill. They stay in the fridge, but they, you know, once you take them out, they warm up to room temperature pretty quickly.
So, obviously, you've got your stunning cookbook, which is available pretty much worldwide. But I would love to know, besides your own, what would be your most loved cookbook or the most used cookbook?
The cookbook that I really love, there are actually two, but they're by the same author, is Yamuna Devi's her classic, which is considered like the encyclopedia of Indian vegetarian cooking. It's called Lord Krishna's Cuisine, The Art of Indian Vegetarian Cooking. It's like 500 pages, maybe more. It's a very thick book. And I knew Yamuna Devi personally. I was very fortunate to spend time with her and learn from her. And I just love, because I know her personally, but also what she taught me, and she was an inspiration behind writing my book. She was extremely meticulous, perfectionist, but in a healthy way, you know, because she wanted the reader to have the best experience with her recipes. So the way she would describe them, she would test them multiple times, measure the ingredients, and give different types of measurements just to help the reader have success with her recipes and feel empowered cooking. So I love her book. There's so much to learn from her book. It's from the stories to the ingredients to the methods of preparation to the Indian names. It's just an amazing book. And then her other book, which is more for Western audience, is called Yamuna's Table. And this was her attempt to create like Western-like dishes that are more healthy according to her research at that time. This was back in the early 90s. And yeah, she's another great person who passed away. But her books continue to be printed, and I highly recommend those books if you like to learn more about vegetarian cooking.
And it's so nice to, particularly, it's very relevant to the world and what we've been going through the past few months, that food really is medicine, and we can really take our health back into our own hands in learning how to just cook really good food. And as we've already spoken to, use spices. And I think it's, you know, worth mentioning that the Ayurvedic wisdom is that, you know, it's not so much about what you eat, but what you digest. You can spend so much money on, you know, all this fancy organic food and think that you're doing the right thing nutritionally, but still have major digestive issues and digestive complaints, and you're not absorbing all this, you know, richness that you are spending your money on. And it really just, this whole conversation, I think, emphasizes that, you know, we must treat food as our medicine first and foremost to be proactive. But beyond that, we need to be digesting it as well.
You know, I offer Ayurvedic nutritional consultations and just helping people determine what foods are good for them. I read their pulse and ask them about their eating habits and schedule and all that. And they all tell me I eat very healthy, but I'm still not feeling well. And some tell me, oh, I'm so sick of healthy food. So I always tell them my mission in life is to prove people that healthy food can be really delicious. But at the same time, when I start asking them, so what do you eat? And they will say, oh, I have some yogurt and blueberries in the morning. And I'm like, you know, these are really two great foods for you. But when you eat them together, the food compatibility piece is that they start fighting in your stomach because they're incompatible. When you eat them together, they're incompatible for digestion. Okay, so what else are you, what spices are you cooking with? Oh, I'm using this and that. And I'm like, you know, your liver is so hot, this is going on, you have skin rashes and this and that. And you're eating these very heating spices, they will just perpetuate the problem. They're like, I didn't know that, I was doing everything wrong. And I'm like, you know, it's one thing to eat healthy, but you also have to know what healthy foods are healthy for you right now. So that's where Ayurveda comes in a very personalized way. And if you cannot figure it out by yourself, just find a good Ayurvedic practitioner who can guide you through the process.
And spices don't necessarily mean spicy.
Exactly. Yeah. You can have a very flavorful dish that's not spicy, hot, pungent.
Our little boy eats a lot of food with spices and it's not spicy. I would never be putting chili in his body and, or anything that's overly heating, such a sensitive digestive system. And like kids can love these kinds of foods as well. It's not something that has to be exclusively, you've got to cook something separate for yourself. This is about how you can really integrate these changes into the whole household if you've got children or your partner or something living with you. And even I think, you've definitely mentioned this, cooking seasonally is a way to prepare food for everybody in a way that's complementary and harmonious for everyone. I'd love to ask you, just before we wrap up here, what does life living in alignment look or feel like to you?
Alignment is something I honestly think about constantly, pray for. It's first of all aligning with who I am and where I'm at right now, and then focusing on my goals in life, where I want to be, or what I want to be, who I want to be, and what I want to offer as a contribution to the world. And then aligning everything in between, including food. I always see food as my companion, as somebody who helps me in my journey, supports me in my journey, rather than become an impediment on my journey. So alignment for me is it's a daily meditation.
And as someone who's very much living their dharma as you appear to be, it's like almost as if your life and your work is ultimately a continual offering.
It comes with its pitfalls, yeah, because it never ends.
Yeah.
But alignment also is a great source of satisfaction and happiness, because I feel that I'm doing the right thing at the right time. And when I don't feel that way, then I always check with myself. So where am I misaligning? Where I'm straying away? It's when I don't feel satisfied or fulfilled or content with life. It's like, okay, I'm taking a detour. so it's time to think about and come back to alignment. And that's also the value of having teachers and guides, spiritual teachers and guides, but also in different areas of life. One of their jobs, not their jobs, but they're your teachers because they're helping you come back to alignment.
Mm. And Ayurveda is just that, like harmonious living.
Yeah.
The seasons, our environment, our own constitution.
Yeah, lifestyle, our diet, living in harmony so that we can be the best versions of ourselves. Sounds so unreal.
It is easier said than done, of course, but it's nice to keep that in the background, at all times. And this is the great gift of the knowledge of Ayurveda and the blessing to have it be a part of our paths and our lives. And, even if we can just take something small away from it that can, enhance our life, then that's such an immense blessing, certainly. I would love to know, what have you got coming up? Have you got any other books or classes or trainings? I know that life is a bit wild at the moment and the restaurant is open and running in New York City, but yeah, what's coming up?
Yeah, believe it or not, we have so much coming up. I just signed the contract for my next cookbook, which will be Ayurvedic cooking by ingredient.
Wow.
I'm not supposed to reveal the title yet. But I'm very happy with the same publisher as the first book, Ritzali. They really produce beautiful books. I'm working on that now. And I just recorded, just last Monday, we recorded a 3-part cooking class series, Introduction to Ayurvedic Cooking, where I explain, it's a little more talking than cooking. It's really for beginners who want to understand the principles. And then I show how to prepare a few recipes. And I think it will be very helpful. It will be available to purchase for a small fee online, and you can access it from anywhere in the world. And I think it will be really helpful for those who want to start kind of dabbling with cooking healthy for their digestion. And then our restaurant keeps going, thank God. It's been a struggle during COVID, but we are open again. And we also developing a few culinary products that will support you cooking at home. So I've created 4 different spice kits with spice blends and individual spices, some spices that are harder to find. We just want to make it easier for people to find their spices in good, high quality organic, and just start cooking that way.
That's incredibly exciting.
I have other products that we'll review in a couple of weeks, but if you, and then we're moving our school in 2 weeks. We're moving to a new location finally. We couldn't do it before because of COVID, but we'll have a beautiful new base for our cooking school, and really amazing events, hopefully. So if you're in the New York area, just stay in touch, because we'd love for you to visit us there. And always visit us at Divya's Kitchen whenever you're in New York City. We'd love to serve you.
I'm hanging for it. I've already looked at the menu. It's like I already know what I want. It looks incredible. You have to open up global locations, please. That's a selfish request, of course, but
you never know.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I'll keep my fingers and toes tightly crossed. But it all sounds very, very exciting. It sounds like you've got so much going on, and therefore I'm even more honored and grateful for your time today. It's just such a treat to speak with you. Could you share with everybody, where can they find you? Your website, where you are on social media?
Yes, well, we have 3 platforms that kind of they're interwoven, so to say. So our restaurant is divyaskitchen.com, and we're very active on Instagram. You can find us at Divya's Kitchen NYC. My personal blog, where you can find a lot more recipes, and basically all the information I couldn't fit in my first book, I put it on my blog. I had to cut about 100 pages. So it's divyaalter.com. And that's Divya Alter is my personal social media as well. And then our cooking school is called Bhagavat Life, like Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavat Life. And the bvtlife.com and BVT on social media, BVT Life on social media. We'll be making some exciting announcements coming up. And they're also on our websites. I just posted them. I did a few online, like Zoom cooking classes during the lockdown, and they're all available for free online as well.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, great. Well, I'll obviously link to all your sites and things like that in the show notes and whatnot, but that's fantastic. So much goodness to dive into. I'm really excited to see these cooking classes that you've just recorded as well. That's very exciting. It's always nice to go back to basics. Yeah. Well, thank you so very much for your time, Divya, today. It's been a real treat to speak with you. I'm so grateful.
No, thank you. It's so wonderful speaking with you. I wish I could interview you, because you have so much to share as well.
This is the great pleasure of doing a podcast, is just chatting and having great conversations with incredible people. So thank you again.
It was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
If this episode was of value to you and your life, please subscribe. And if you can think of someone who would benefit from this dialogue, please do them a favor and send it their way. If you feel called, hop on over to iTunes and leave a 5-star review. This is the best way to get these conversations into the ears and hearts of our wider community, to those who need it most. You can find me at amyelandry.com or over on Instagram at amyelandry. May we all move a little closer to a life living in alignment.